Okay, back to Ship of the Line out of Flying Colors. This is the Battle of Fort Royal, and you can see it's one heck of a big battle in terms of the number of ships. Maybe not Trafalgar size, but quite large. Yeah, as somebody mentioned, this is the anniversary of Trafalgar, or maybe it was yesterday, but I'm never aware of dates, except a few key ones, and that one would not be key enough for me. I can remember years sometimes. Trafalgar's 1805, right? But what we have here is a situation where Rodney's given orders to Hood, who's going to be our commander here. And I guess I use this Hood. It doesn't differentiate, even though this is Ship of the Line. Oh no, yeah, this is Ship of the Line, which really, if anything, should differentiate the different commanders. But I think it's supposed to be the higher ranked one because we got another guy who's equal rank. There's not much difference, just one larger ship command radius. Either one would work, actually. And maybe I'll look onward and see if any later scenarios have Hood specified at the lower rating. I think I used this higher rating Hood in the other scenario that he was in too. Anyway, Hood's been ordered to intercept a fleet heading for the West Indies, and he couldn't find them. He's ordered to Fort Royal on Martinique in order to blockade it, and he objects because he thinks the enemy will approach from upwind of him. I guess. I don't know. That doesn't make a lot of sense. We put his fleet downwind of enemy approaches. Anyway, de Grasse, who's our commander here. Wow, it's having trouble focusing there, huh? Is in command of the French fleet, and he's on the opposite side of the island. Hood gets his fleet close enough to begin a long-distance cannonade with de Grasse's ships as they come up around the island. Now, essentially, no major battle really happened, just a long-range cannonading. And de Grasse was unwilling to press Hood, and Hood was in the worst position, as he would be indeed going against the wind if he came down there. There's our wind marker. This sucker only goes 12 turns. It counts as having shoals or reefs in this E area with a -1 on the grounding table. So I can't really just scroll the map the way you would in some cases. And the Brits have a 1-point audacity advantage, for whatever that matters. When I look at the fleets, I get the impression the French fleet is actually larger. I'm not sure in number of ships. It looks about the same size. If I even these up, yeah, it looks like they may have an extra couple of ships on them. They also have some heavier first rankers here, or first raters, which the English do not have. So, on the other hand, the English have carronades present in this one, which means the French don't terribly want to close. With only 12 turns, full break rules, etc. in place, it might be to the French's advantage to try to keep this as a long-range duel, knock out some rigging, and see if they can get their advantage from that, to the extent that they're willing to close. We'll see. Right, so we got full sail on all the ships, just because, well, they move faster that way, and there's no danger to begin with in this or most scenarios. Now, wargamers never really want to play something out unless they're going to engage. The idea of a couple of lines of ships kind of lining up and firing at long range and not really engaging over 12 rounds, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. It might be for me, but part of me wants to say, you know what? I think de Grasse had the right of this staying away. And I think Hood was making the mistake because the English have no reason to be pansies in any of these games, I think. Even with the wind against them, it could change. And they have the audacity advantage. They have the carronades. They want to get close, and they think they have a good chance of pummeling the French. Can the French pass by and maybe run through? Maybe. That may be the best move. But that gets rid of whatever positional advantage the French have, and then the English kind of win in their own sort of way. Maybe not the scenario, but in terms of the strategic overview, they're looking to blockade the port. If they can get the French out of the way successfully, they've done that, essentially. If the French want to come back with the wind against them, feel free. So, the French are probably going to close, to some extent, to try to get the rigging shots and see if they can get their hope in as well. So we're going to see a much more active than the historical occurrence here, but Hood definitely wants to close and he wants to pound these French. All the advantages are in his favor as far as I'm concerned, given the system. Obviously, the English are going to have a tough time. They can't simply turn to the French. That's straight into irons. They simply can't do that. So what I'm doing is turning each column, and I'm using my kind of optional command rules idea, because otherwise the French can simply move to the station distance that they want to be at and fire at rigging. Also, with all those full sails on, the English are moving really quickly, so I wanted to do something with them beyond simply streaking towards the edge of the map, which would, given their audacity situation, give them a loss. So that's the end of one turn there. We see the big long column of French ships, but two columns of English ships in the active turn. And continuing that turn with the French getting closer and closer. I'm not sure what this is accomplishing for me here. But I've got my hopes that somehow it will help. However, now I'm beating with the way the English ships, at least in the rear side, are performing. And the French are getting into line while I'm trying to do this tricky maneuver. They're getting closer and closer to the range they want. They want to fire at about range, well, it depends on the ships really, but I want to shoot probably around ranges 4 or 5. I'm at about 8 right now, so I don't want to open with my initial broadsides at this kind of range. That's just not going to do much. French continue to close. The range is actually good enough that I'd be shooting, except I had my full sails still up, so I dropped those. The English still performing their weird little maneuver. I don't know what they hope to get out of it. Doesn't look too impressive to me. Looks to me like the big thing they get out of it is shot up by the French with less firepower returning. One thing they do get, though, is the ability to turn their ships, and the ones that do get shot will be firing broadsides from their port and then be spinning around and shooting starboard broadsides later. So I'll get both their first fires, but there's quite a chance that the French may just turn and hit with lines slicing through those two English squadrons. The thing that I'm counting on with the English, though, is no matter what they do, maybe this jerking around will convince the French to close, and if the French close, I'm just counting the British superior gunfire ability with the carronades, with the audacity, with the British advantage at firing at hulls, will all be the telling blow on the French. And here we have the English still pursuing their course of trying to get a decisive engagement at close range or whatever. Well, the French slid in, did some firing at these guys. They got the initiative and actually got the first shot off. They would have gotten a first shot off at something against the rigged ships, the fully tacked sails. And you can see they did some significant damage to some of the rigging. There was one shot back at this one, I believe, in passing. Limited damage to it. But at these long ranges, you're not going to do a lot of damage. The English actually took a decent amount of damage on the Shrewsbury. Is that this one? I don't know where the Shrewsbury is. Something. There it is. Yeah, that took heavy hits because of this. This actually went for the hull. But most of the fire was at a distance that I figured hitting rigging was more sensible. And even over here, we shot up some of the rigging, got some lucky shots, but for the most part, pretty limited. The English don't feel like they're getting out of it too badly yet, if they can get closer. But that's a big if. Right now they have to tack to come into the French. That's not something they terribly want to do. They certainly don't want to do this complicated maneuver again of trying to wheel in front of the enemy. But they're mainly holding their fire in the hopes of getting a close shot. That's not something the French are just going to give them, though. So they may have to tack, try to move directly into the French line, try to cut it apart, and rely on their own gunpowder to handle that. And I think next turn, next turn is going to be a wind change turn. So as soon as I clean all these fire markers off, I can roll to see if that's going to change. It's just normal wind. You can see I didn't take every possible shot with the French. For example, these guys could have fired, but they would have been firing directly with the wind. That gives a penalty to firing at rigging, and I didn't want to do that. The English have only one unit that fired. I still have full sails up on this thing because it's slipping behind trying to get the turn in. One of those ships is getting left behind from that. So let's see whether or not we get a wind direction shift. Is that over here? It must be on the back of this one. It's been a little while since I played. No. Which means the English are still in the crapper as far as this. We're almost halfway through the scenario. No damage, basically. I mean, rigging damage doesn't count. One thing to note, these guys I've judged to be out of command. Unless... Yeah. So this column is in command, even the ship that's facing the wrong way on the idea of turning. But these guys have fallen more than 4 hexes behind the column. They're no longer part of the squadron in the same fashion. So I'm going to have to make out of command die rolls to see if they are able to move effectively. It may give the French a little bit more ability to shoot up their rigging. And, you know, if they can knock some ships so that they can't move, then they can concentrate on those and try to take them down. English, by forcing the French to go first, they took some licks. They had exchange of firepower here, but now I'm free to tack with at least one of my squadrons. I was afraid to tack before, because if I did it, I'd be bow first into this whole line of French ships, and the French wouldn't necessarily come any closer based on that. But now I've got the opportunity to try to close with them, at least with one line. And I also have my out-of-command little grouping there. Attacking mostly went well, but one break that didn't make it. And that's too big a distance to span. So what we're going to have is a bunch of ships out of command. Basically, let's see, where's my flag? It's way back here. He's only got a 5 hex range, so he can only command these 3 ships. The rest of the command is going to be knocked out of command. Also, in that turning, we conducted a lot of rigging fire. Got into range where our carronades can hit. And basically the idea here is to hamper and hinder the French maneuverability enough that we get a little bit of an edge on that so we can close and start firing. The real reason, it's the wind direction. In each case, I got an additional +1 for firing over what I would have gotten. The English fire bonus would have been directly against the wind and canceled out. Instead, by going with the wind, I get the +1. So it seemed worthwhile. A lot of the attacks were made on the 13 chart, which is pretty impressive. But with the Audacity, the first fire, the carronades, all that coming in. So, yeah, I was able to get some effect off of it. Nothing tremendous there. Now all I've got is the out of commands. I got to try to roll command on them and see what they can do. And as as we move this forward, I think to turn 6. Yeah. Kinda sucks not having a turn record track. First of all, these guys didn't do anything exciting. The only one that could have fired was, I think, this guy. Well, this guy could have, but he was at a distance, and he didn't get his command roll. I didn't bother rolling for the others. This guy had already fired his broadside. Got one of them. I'm calling this in command, but the rest of the squadron is going to be out still. Over here you can see the French have a couple of ships on fire. You know, nothing terrible going on there. Some rigging damage of some significance, but also this one's got 3 hits on it. A little bit more exciting, though, than what historically happened. The English having the better commander allows them to kind of play for time and make a maneuver like this. And now they're in position to close. Yeah, they're still beating. That's not the greatest situation in the world, but they can now slice through the French ships, maybe get some rakes, or the French can turn and face them and fight it through. But either way, at least the English have forced an engagement. Now, they've forced an engagement with a bigger squadron than they are, which may not be the best thing in the world. Over here, the numbers may be a little more equal, but the English have taken some significant rigging hits, at least. The ship that took the most hits and is, you know, halfway to damaged is the Shrewsbury. I think that's over here. And well, that's going to be in the middle of things. All right. You can see the English have quite a few ships that are out of command. I've decided to forego marking these couple of ships back here and using the formation command that I like to enable, and instead have dropped to Hood's command radius, leaving the front end of his formation out of command. The rest of his ships he's flagging and preparing to, you know, he wants more ability to have some flexible response to what might happen here. Unfortunately, the French won the initiative, but the French choose to go first, which may give the English the choice they want for being able to try to attack with this squadron as well. The French rear column moves first, taking advantage of all those potential bow rakes. They didn't get a single bow rake, but at least they didn't get shot at in return yet. The out-of-command ships have to maybe do some kind of dancing to avoid running next to one of the French ships. They're not allowed to come close unless they make their command check. The other ships, of course, can do some pass-throughs and can probably do some significant damage. We're going to get some nice exchanges there. But the English line, you can see, is getting kind of chewed up here a little bit. The English get to choose what they're going to do next. At this point, I almost feel like I want to move some of my out-of-command ships, not particularly to delay time, because that, of course, doesn't even work if I want to, but just I want to get them out of the way so that I open my options up. Alternatively, of course, I can play down here. A little bit of a tangled-up mess here, and I think the English have kind of lost their command here. Essentially, the captain, Drake, not the Drake, of course, is, he was wounded, and his ships are kind of out of alignment. I think he can still hold these 3, but that's it. These out-of-command ships back here are probably going to stay that way. The French line is now trying to slip behind the English line and maybe come back around or whatever. We're doing kind of this double slice through the English command if you look through it. But the English can now either cut across here or can cut down, cut across here. And I've got to kind of decide which makes more sense. Right, the remainder of the ships have moved. I'm going to pull these suckers off. But you can see where firing has occurred. The English pulling off some more fire here. They've decided to leave these guys kind of facing the wrong way. I had no easy way to turn them. I couldn't get them back into formation fully. So kind of running alongside the fleet and maybe being able to turn at some point might work out, might not. One of the nice things is the English have a good commander in Hood. He gives them 4, They have an audacity rating of 1. That means they have better than a 50% chance when they're out of command being able to engage still. And that's what we see here. A couple of these ships sidled right up and unloaded into the hull of some of the French ships. And we're starting to see some significant damage showing up on the French ships too now. This is the English advantage. They can be outsailed, outpositioned, and still close in if they can manage it. And they have better chances of doing so, and really, pound because of the advantages of the carronades, the audacity level. Their own advantage on being able to fire at hull. Here they can fire at the hulls with no penalty, even though they're going against the wind. Largely they've been choosing to take rigging shots to screw with the French formation a little bit, as long as they've been firing against the wind directly. When they're not firing against the wind, they go for hull shots. But now that we're close in, what the hell? Let's just pound those suckers. We still have some French ships on fire I gotta take care of. The French opened up the initiative, and I don't know what this is, turn 7, 2, 4, 6, 7. Started to move this column because they have the most opportunities. A lot of bow rakes coming through here, and just, well, the fire against the out of command units, those are going to get to shoot back if I shoot at them, but I can pass by this one without it shooting, for example. I can choose not to shoot at both of them, and maybe I'll end up not aligned with them. Chances are they're going to fire, though, and not this one. But first move, sliding, the Ville de Paris into a bow rake. Now, it gave a bow rake to the Alfred at 1 hex range, and it took a few points of damage. But then it unloaded with 14, a full cripple plus 3 more hits on its own bow rake. Just wrecked the ship in one shot. That's what happens when a first rate gets too close to you, isn't it? But the French didn't terribly want to close, but they were kind of pushed into it here. This was maybe the English plan. Of course, they were able to get some nice rakes going on, including, this is kind of weird, like the Hercules here slid into this hex and was able to rake this ship, but then it sailed into here and got raked by both. Actually, the aft rake didn't succeed. You can see some significant damage to that. Not quite damaged yet. In fact, I don't think any ships are vulnerable yet, although you can see there are a lot of English damaged ships kicking around. This is turning into a bit of a slugfest. Not at all historical here, but, who wants to play a long-range duel? This is a what-if. So the English squadron pushes through a little further, exchanging some fire right in here. That's about all that happened there. Then the French push around, looping around using my special formation option that's not in the rules. And you can see a lot of exchanges at range, a lot of these British firing back this time. They've decided they can't really stand there and just take rigging hits. So they're shooting back at the hull, and they're distributing some decent shots at some of these ships. It's not that bad a thing as long as they can fire. Of course, that's first fire. Generally, we're not seeing a lot of hits either, like a hull and a rigging, or a couple of hull hits or something like that. And likewise for the French. But neither one really makes a lot of sense there. We got something got dismasted here. This guy. This was the problem, which is that the whole French fleet is sailing by this one ship and able to come kind of close to it after it fires. You can see I lowered the range to where, firing's a little more effective. It's been dismasted. It's rather beat up. I don't remember which ship that is. That's the Ajax. Ajax B. It's only taken 5 hull hits, but it has no mass. So it actually has a chance of striking. I don't know. If it doesn't strike, I don't think there's a chance of breaking. I think you have to either strike or sink a ship to break it. So anyway, we've moved both the French and British fleets here. The French fleet here. It's the Brits to take another action. They've got this squadron here, and then they've got the out-of-command ships. The French, I think, are out. I think they've moved all their ships. Which command situation's not good at all here. We've got our commander down here with a couple of ships. This one's facing the wrong way. He had to actually tack through the wind in order to avoid a collision. It was the only way he could avoid a collision after this ship moved. But this ship moving was important because it performed an aft rake on one of them big ships and did a huge amount of damage, something like 12 points in one big blast. Not enough to cripple that because that thing's a monstrosity. First rate can take 15 hits, but still a nice start on it, right? I've got some stuff that's vulnerable and some possibilities of strikings, maybe even of a sinking on the Shrewsbury. I'm not sure. After I clear some stuff off, take care of the fires and stuff, I'll come. Although the English ships have suffered pretty heavily, none of them actually had a chance of striking yet. The fleet commander is too good. Hood is too good for that. So we're not going to see an easy break there. This one's actually turning out more interesting than most of the battles that I've seen. I really like the maneuvering that's going on in this. And we're still exchanging fire and combating. It's not like one of them that I thought was really interesting. There wasn't a lot of fighting engagement. Basically, the two fleets passed near each other and one of them broke. Well, in this case, we're still seeing that jockeying and maneuvering. But I think we're beginning to see why Hood did not want to engage here. And for that matter, why the French didn't want to engage either. This is kind of a toss-up. It really is. The English have all the advantages in a lot of ways, and they did want to engage and did their tricky kind of stuff to try to force that. The French moved up. Long-range fire is not terribly effective. 4 hexes, which is where I stay out of the carronade range, that's where I want to be with the French. That's just not really going to cause a lot of damage for the most part. But that's close enough that I forced the English to be able, or that I put myself in a position where the English were able to cut in and hammer some of these ships. And likewise, though, many of the English ships are in worse shape. So probably the best result that Hood could hope for was this standoff. What I'm seeing here looks really ugly. It's possible that the English could win. They're definitely doing damage to those French ships. It's just there's a lot more boxes which indicate cripples, and if you look on the board, a lot more crippled, a lot closer to striking as well for the English. The French got the initiative and continue to slide around in this sort of twisted ass formation, just pummeling the rear guard of that one British column there. But as they move forward, you can see there's an exchange of fire going back and forth. Both sides shooting at Hull. The French getting the +1 advantage because they can kind of manage to get the wind in the right position. The English getting a +1 advantage because they wait to fire until the wind's not directly against them. They're not going for the rigging hits now. They just want to try to score victory. Anyway, you know, at this point, they really need to start scoring some real hits and crippling some shit. Well, the English column is beating, pushing its way through here, although some of the end ships weren't. Swerved around to try to get into column here. And let's talk about a monster. Here's a true one, 19 hull hits it takes. Right now, it's already taken 16 though, as it's getting aft raked and then fired from here. And it had taken some significant hits already. It was already taking a reduction to its rate due to fire. And, well, now the rest of the French ships get to go, and then the English, in their kind of sporadic way with all their out-of-command ships, as they try to bring them either closer together or maybe steer them into this column. It's kind of an interesting situation because wherever ships have kind of become detached, like these couple French ships up here, they get in trouble as a formation remaining in formation just passes through them and wrecks them, whereas the actual formations are having trouble coming to grips with each other in this scenario. French trailing columns able to get some nice shots in here on the back end of the English. Actually, aft rakes on both these ships because they're facing different directions. I've sort of learned to try to keep formation a little better. The French certainly are, with these additional rules to help maintain columns that I sort of fudge all the time. Yeah, it works pretty well. But the English, with their silly tacking and everything, got themselves into a lot of trouble formation-wise, and you can see the effects of that. But the ships that didn't fire, and things like this that are going to be able to turn and get an aft rake as well, well, they're going to get their last licks as they work through there. I don't know if there's a lot. This column's pretty much used up. That's already moved. But I got all of this down here to move now. It's not all one column, but most of the English ships that are out of command, and obviously these guys, all are going to get to shoot. This guy may not, unless he curves through there, and I don't know how much sail he has left on him. And we've pushed into the next turn, whatever that is, 9 or something like that. Finally, one English ship went under, the poor Shrewsbury. It's almost impossible for an English ship to strike. Even if they're out of hits, they still only have a 10% chance. On the other hand, it's not impossible for these things to break up and keel over. And so now the English are in the position where they do have to roll each turn. As long as the French have more undamaged ships, which is the case right now, they have a 10% chance of simply breaking. So far the French are winning this battle, there's no question. But a little bit more time, a little bit more close shots by the English, it could end up in a somewhat different situation. Certainly since they've managed to close and start fighting a little bit more competently, they've been gaining on the French. So, although the French are able to really concentrate on ships as they curve through and hit some of the kind of wings, as it were, almost, the front or back of the formation of the column. Just being able to slide through and hit that with significant number of ships at once. They're able to do enough damage at closer range with those kind of maneuvers. Alrighty. The out of command markers. You can see the situation is getting kind of ugly for both sides here. Even playing with my kind of, this is a column, sorta. It does get rough. For example, here, this ship turning, I had to choose, am I following this flaming wreck, or am I following this ship? Now, normally I'd want to follow the good ship and keep that in command, but to tell you the truth, that's heading off God knows where, rather fast, actually. And I want to keep in contact with the French as close as I can, so I've chosen to keep a line ahead as much as I can and declare that this is out of command. This is actually this normal command rules. This would be violating the normal command in order to follow, hey, that's the column, and that's what the column actually intended to do. But I'm going to ignore it. So the English ganged up here on the Hercule. Did some significant damage to it. It's crippled with a few hits. And then I moved the French column. And this guy I'm beginning to think is out of column at this point. Yes, he's within the 4 hexes. But it's beginning to feel like this is not a clear turn. I may decide he's out of command. Essentially, though, we've been swinging by, shooting up the various English ships in the rear guard there. The English moved one of their out-of-command ships and exchanged fire with, I think that's the Hector there. And then the French main column up to about here moved. Now my hope is to move these guys and back a lot of wind, back sails, whatever, in order to try to get them back in command. That may be too much to ask, but we managed to sling by and open some fire on some of the English ships here. Do a bit of damage to them. We've still got all these guys in command. The question is whether or not those guys have been, if their sails have been hit enough that they can slow down. Or maybe turn and declare themselves a column, but that seems a little cheap. That seems to go beyond what I'd call the normal realm of things, but I may not be able to tell the difference after I walk away or whatever. Now this English column begins to slash through, cutting some bows and sterns here. I'm not really getting any significant stern rake there. This guy's the guy who might get that if he can get his command rating. But I ran into a problem with this ship. He doesn't have any movement points. Now normally that allows you to sternway, but a sternway would require me to move perhaps that way and then turn. I've got to make a roll. If he, well, actually I don't have to make a roll. I can essentially do this shift and this. That's his only legitimate move. Now, that's not the best of places to be, but at least it might give me a movement point. I have a -4. I'm getting a 5-point wind off that, so I'll get a 1-point move. Some of the rigging, these two guys both are dismasted, so it's pretty much the end of them. The French ships are just going to spin around and finish them off, and then try to chase down the tail of what remains of the English line. We're back on the French, and I think all I've got is the out-of-command ships. One of those interesting conditions where both fleets are vulnerable. The French still have one more undamaged ship, although obviously things are going poorly for the French if they've taken that much damage compared to the English as things have closed. Both sides are going to need a 0, that means, to break. And neither one breaks, so we'll be moving forward to some turn I can't read. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This will be a weather change possibility turn. The reason is that there's a risk of French breaking as one of their ships went under. We've now got 2 British ships sunk so far. And we're getting close to the end either way. I was kind of thinking to myself, gee, if they break, I may actually play out the withdrawal this time. What did we have happen that was so exciting at the end? I wanted to speak to something, but I can't really remember what. One thing I did want to mention, though, these little counters, the fired ports are kind of yellow compared to the fired starboards, but it would have been really cool, and I may take a highlighter and fix this, to make the fired boats on the ports, the opposite side of the ports, also yellow, for the simple fact that it makes it just easier to sort them. It's one of those minor, gee, maybe if anybody's listening who's involved in production of later ones of these, it would be a helpful little change to the counters. Because when they say fired both, you have no idea which type they are. And there's no reason for them to be yellow or white in particular, except to help you sort. Just slicing forward with the French fleet here, and kind of cutting some nice shots in. Coming across here, trading fire here and there. And then moving the English column, God knows what it is. The one that was heading down this way, it's now this kind of mess here. And it's becoming less and less of a column, but you can kind of pretend that it exists there. I noticed something horrible. I've got my admiral for the French fleet here. He was under an out-of-command ship, which is, of course, impossible. But he was the guy who was commanding all of this, so I don't know what to do. I'll try to move it as an out-of-command ship, I guess, again, and see what I can figure out with it. But, yeah, that was a big oops. It looked like, hey, I got a nice big formation. Yeah, unfortunately, the lead ship is the important one here. All right, back on the French. Squadron of sharks circling around. These are all now dismasted English ships. One of them just recently. That's become just a mess. Sort of a clusterfuck where I got some range here under whoever this commander is, but not a lot. 1, 2. He basically has command maybe of 1, 2, 3 to about here. We're going to have everything else out of command because that's just become such a total mess that I no longer have anything that I can call a real formation anymore there. All right. The English have one command left and then a bunch of out-of-command ships, and the French have just their out-of-command ships left to play around with. And we slide into turn 11 here, 2 more turns only, with, I think something else broke up, but I'm not sure. Maybe not. I know we had some fires that were going, but most of them have cleared up. We only have 1 left here. Mainly it's just, you know, the royal mess that this game tends to devolve into. No nice little formations at the end of it all. Well, due to the issue I noticed last turn, the entire French rear column here is out of command. Of course, a lot of the English are out of command too. Not this guy. I've got this one column here, and then this becomes a mess, and many of the French ships are out of command there. You know, I got away with cheating last turn, but I can't continue that cheating just based on the fact that I managed it once. And it's going to be an English initiative. A large number of out-of-command ships. This has largely been a tit-for-tat, move one ship on each side type of thing. But the French did have a command here that they were starting to get into better formation. It's now all at least facing the same way, except for a couple of these out-of-command ships that I can see if I can kind of slide in there. I doubt it. But, yeah, it's getting me somewhere. And a whole mess of other ships, though, with these out-of-command markers that still have to be. Once things degenerate to the extent that they have in this game, I lose all track of narrative. I'm lucky to move my ships. In fact, I'm kind of glad I got up real ultra early this morning, like around 4:30, because I think I have time to pump out the last turn. These turns become very, very difficult if I'm using the game as I often play things during my workday, which is, well, probably not something you should be doing, but my computer ends up, you know, busy and I can't do anything. And, well, if I come away from here, spend 10 minutes here, go back, my computer is done with whatever it's doing, some big save or whatever, and if I don't save, I end up losing all my work. So, anyway, that said, we lost another French ship. The Valiant this time went under, and nobody surrendered, or nobody broke, so let's see what we got. The English get the initiative again, and you can see the French were unable to get back in command. It's gotten worse, actually. If they had gotten lucky, they could have transferred their admiral off this wrecked ship. And putting him back here, say, he would have put most of this back in command. But that didn't happen. In fact, nobody's been able to transfer their admiral. The English have one back here on a damaged ship as well, and they weren't able to move him. I usually forget to do that, though. It's really a bad idea to forget because it's an easy way to lose your admirals, but the chance isn't terribly high. All right, we will try to figure out what the English are going to do, what they need to do first. It's kind of hard to tell. Normally I like to move a formation early, but right now everything is pretty much out of range. These poor suckers are so slow that they can't catch up to anything. This thing's a wreck, basically, unable to likely get fire. Most of the French fleet isn't going to fire on me. So I don't know. Pretty much our final position. Not a lot was happening here. The English tried to tack, but this is the end of the game. This tacking for positioning doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We also had the, what is it? I don't know, Magname, I don't know, I can't read, managed to succeed in its command role and slip through some of the English ships, get some rikes. But it took a pounding before that happened, so it really wasn't able to do much. At this point, I really just have to assess whether or not more ships sink, and if a fleet breaks. And if that doesn't happen, then we just count points, I guess. This is the points pile here. Sunk ships over on this side, and you can see 3 French sunk ships, 2 English sunk ships. The other side is the damaged ships, 2, 4, 6, 8 English damaged, 6 French damaged. So you're going to say, wow, that's going to be damn close, isn't it? Yeah, pretty close, but not as close as it looks. The reason is the French come into this game with more points on the bigger ships. They should win then, right? Yeah, I mean, early on, they certainly forced the English to make earlier break checks because they were able to wreck some of these lighter English ships. But when it comes down to the scoring, some of those wrecked French ships end up being worth more than the wrecked English ships. It actually ends up that the value of these two sets is equal. The destroyed French ships, none of them are biggies. There was a monster damaged ship here, this guy. Saint Esprit. And I thought I got the Villars too. The Villars, the Villa de France. Or de Paris. Yeah, so that's another big one worth 9. That's even bigger. So, anyway, damage points are only half, but we end up with 20 points each on damage. Actually, I think one's 20.5. I don't remember which one. Probably the French. But the French had 16 points sunk because they lost an extra ship. So it ends up being, you know, kind of this bloody Pyrrhic victory for the English. But that's more or less what I assumed. The English could pound their way into a victory if they could get their ships into line. They're going to take some damage. They certainly took a lot of rigging damage that made it difficult to maintain a formation and to really catch up to some of the French ships. But eventually you get into line and you can get a fire going, and you got the audacity, you got all the carronades, you got everything going for you here. The French fleet is just not able to stand up to the English fleet in this era, which is funny because historically the French fleet did not do badly during the Revolutionary era, but they just can't take an open battle is what it comes down to. And I guess they avoided most of those when they could. All right, sending this one up. Constantinople soon.